I would have imagined that it's pretty tough to take your own life the way it's talked about here, and that, maybe somebody was with him at the time to hold him down as he fought in the last minute.
Friends, I just want to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and pushing play. The interview you're about to hear, I think, is very important because it's going to shed light on the big picture of charity fraud, which, of course, in our circles is best exemplified by the Clinton Foundation and what the Clinton Foundation did to victimize the people of Haiti. I have Charles Ortel back on the line, and of course, Charles came to prominence back in 2007 when he divulged some of the curious business practices or accounting practices of General Electric, and he has since turned his attention to the Clinton Foundation, where he's uncovered billions in fraud. Charles joins me right now to talk about the hurricane relief efforts and so much more. Charles, how are you?
Thanks for having me on, Sean. It's a delight to rejoin.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you back. I think we last talked to you about a year ago, and we talked about the Clinton Foundation specifically. And of course, now there seem to be even more bodies being added to the Clinton body count. And, later in the interview, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you about your friend Peter Smith, who died in my neck of the woods in Rochester,
Sure.
Minnesota, earlier this year, right across the street from the Mayo Clinic. But first, if we could, can I get your opinion on the American Red Cross? Because I just want to remind everybody now that the American Red Cross is the charity du jour for all of these celebrities. Oprah's giving to the Red Cross, Ellen DeGeneres, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Sean Combs linked to the Red Cross, and then when you click on that link, it shows you a picture of Kevin Hart. They've raised $1.43 million just between the celebrity drive alone. But Chris Brown tweeted, "I'm skeptical about the Red Cross, so my donation will go to the people." And I think Chris Brown has it right, because you'll recall, Charles, that after the Haitian earthquake, the Red Cross raised some $500 million. They say that they provided homes to more than 130,000 people, but they only built 6 permanent homes. And they used $125 million of that dollars by their own admission for internal expenses. What is your opinion on the Red Cross?
I would stay far away from it. I mean, I think that it's a real tragedy. There are so many good, hardworking, honest people in America who really give not only of money, which is easy to give away, but more importantly of time and care and attention, unpaid time, care, and attention, where they don't actually seek a tax benefit for that. And there's so much good work going on that when these large organizations with the big brand names that sound like they're good stray and don't provide robust accounting and transparency into their activities, don't really explain that, disasters sadly are going to occur so long as this planet spins around the sun. That's just the way it works. We live on 30% of the surface of the earth, 70% is water. The ground is unstable. There are volcanoes, there are earthquakes, there's this, there's that, high winds, etc. Sadly, a lot of people have elected to live in harm's way in the hurricane cone and the ring of fire in Asia and elsewhere. So, of course, there are going to be these natural disasters. And when they happen, given PayPal, given the Internet, given the generosity of the human spirit, given the fact that people around the world have a lot of money, money just flows in gigantic amount towards charities. And even when they're well done, you don't really get a true accounting for what may have actually happened to the money, if any, until well after the event has, people have forgotten about the event. And when you have international charities in particular, those are very dangerous because, currency movements go up and down. Corruption is rife around the world and now rising in the U.S. So you have the perfect ingredients for fraud. When you send money on a PayPal account or however you send it, to a charity, do you check the address? Do you check to make sure that it's the real Red Cross and not some scam artist pretending to be the Red Cross? And so, I actually think this is an area that needs to be far more tightly regulated, needs to be brought into the 21st century to 2017 and beyond. We have to go to a system where charities that solicit must provide evidence that they are validly organized and operated anywhere they do solicit, in an accessible way so it's not difficult to figure it out. And the penalties for scamming should be as severe as for murder. I mean, they should be very severe penalties for doing this because sadly, these type of scams are, the bigger the better as far as fraudsters are concerned. So I'm glad you're bringing this up. I would stay far away from the Red Cross. You're right, they have been under scrutiny in the past. It is too big of an organization with too much overhead, in my opinion. And, the allocation, it has so many existing activities and offices and people around the world. How do you truly know that they're allocating fairly? In contrast, a lot of these church groups and faith-based groups, they're using volunteers only in many cases. And, they're often far more effective, particularly if they're local, they know the area. So I congratulate you for bringing this up, and I think it deserves a lot of attention.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your time on this because, I talked to James Wesley Rawls, the founder of Survival Blog, not long ago, and he recommended Franklin Graham's Samaritan's Purse, which I think is well known for giving 90% plus of the donations directly to where they're meant to go. Now, what troubles me about the Red Cross is just given the recent hurricanes with Harvey and Irma, on August 30th, NPR came out with a report quoting a Red Cross executive who says he doesn't know what portion of donations go to Harvey relief. Now, with all of the money coming into the Red Cross because of these hurricanes, they ought to have a better block answer than "we're just not sure." That's not acceptable at all, Charles.
Absolutely, I agree. But you see, this is what I call the developing country problem. When you have a developing country that has lots of issues attached to it, and you decide to send money to that country, even if you specifically state that the money is supposed to build a hospital, what you've done is you relieved that developing country of the obligation to build a hospital. So they can take the money that you're using to build the hospital to go to Switzerland and have fancy parties. So the real effort to examine where the money's going, where you think it's going, where it actually went, is a complex matter. And most accounting firms, even most charities, don't have the ability to really check that and to provide the type of accounting we need. And so what these fraudsters do, and I would argue there are many of them, including government fraudsters, they get together and, if it bleeds, it leads in media. So when there are these epic disasters and hurricanes, you get glued to your TV set, you're watching all this stuff, you're reaching into your pocket, you're sending dribs and drabs for maybe lots of money. But that's dangerous activity. I would say that, it's not clear to me that one should rush into the breach just as a natural disaster occurs to send money. We should have a better system of having pre-authorized, responsible charities that are required to meet tough tests and that face strict penalties when they stray. And only those charities should be the ones that first on get any kind of money, in my opinion.
Yeah. The problem with the Red Cross, as I see it, is that they have this terrific brand, right? And everybody's familiar with the Red Cross, and it seems like every time there's a disaster or even a big fire in your neighborhood, sometimes you'll see in the news a Red Cross truck, and they're giving out blankets, and they do a really good job at appearing like they're in the heat of it, they're in the mix of it, they are among the first responders, but then you find out they used $125 million from the Haitian donations for internal purposes, and they really can't explain where the other $375 million went, which reminds me a lot of the Clinton Foundation. And I was doing a little research before this call, and of course I was thinking that the heart of the Clinton Foundation fraud began with that Haitian earthquake, but in reading about you, I was reminded that the Clinton Foundation fraud really did begin with an earthquake, but it was an earthquake in India in 2001, which killed 20,000 people. So they were just getting their feet wet back in 2001 with the Indian earthquake, and then they really, really exploited the people of Haiti in 2010. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, the Clinton partnership with the American India Foundation, and how that fraud all began way back in 2001?
Sure. There's a great journalist called Alana Goodman who's now with the Daily Mail in the UK, and she wrote a piece when she was, I think, at the Washington Free Beacon about this. But basically, when Bill left, I would argue in disgrace, on January 20th, 2001, by pardoning Mark Rich, the fugitive billionaire who had been trading with Iran and others illegally, and then who had been evading his taxes in a massive scale, when he pardoned that fugitive without going through the normal pardoning process, that created a furor. And very quickly thereafter, conditions where it was very difficult to raise money just for an ordinary presidential library. So almost in the same, I think before the first week was out, I think it was the 26th of January, that earthquake occurred in Gujarat, which is a very poor portion of India. India is also in parts very poor, but this is a really poor, dry place. And I think it was a lot more than 20,000 people who were hurt. But anyway, the world opened up its arms. This new foundation, the American India Foundation, was created. Bill was made honorary chairman, but none of the disclosures that are required for that foundation were ever made lawfully. It's still today, in 2017, the largest foundation in America focused upon helping across India, Americans help Indians, that is to say, Indians in the Near East or in the subcontinent. And it's never had its books and records properly done. They claim in one report that they raised $1 billion for that earthquake, but in the actual finances for 2001, a very troubled year when all sorts of scandals were occurring, the actual finances for that foundation show they spent less than $100,000 on earthquake relief. So there's something very odd about that. And but it's much easier in the United States or in any rich country to raise something for money for an exotic project like earthquake relief in India. So they did it there, and they keep doing it. He's still honorary chairman. None of the books and records are properly done for that charity, which is a disgrace in my opinion. They raise money across the country with illegal declarations in many states. They've not fessed up to what really happened from the inception forward. Bill's ties to that charity should be disclosed in the Clinton Foundation. They're not. From there, in 2004, early 2005, they got involved with the tsunami in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. That's another, in my view, another big fraud, where billions were in theory raised, but there's never been a proper accounting for how that money went, what good it may have done, what may have been diverted, and lots of people were hurt in that, and it was a very dangerous thing. He followed that up in 2005 with the supposed relief effort for Katrina. Same story there, all sloppy, improper accounting in the Clinton Foundation, not enough disclosure about related party transactions, where a donor gives something to a charity but gets something illegally back in return. And that did happen, I believe, in Katrina, may have happened in tsunami, certainly happened in American India Foundation. Then they moved from that to the Gulf Coast recovery effort in 2008. And finally, to the one you're talking about in Haiti, where on January 12th, 2010, that the horror happened in Haiti. That's a country of about 10 million people who on average earn about $1,000 each, so $10 billion a year is what they earn and consume. We and others may have sent them as much as 13, maybe $15 billion. Bill and a crooked former leader of Haiti were put in charge by the UN of that effort, and they refused to make accounting for what really may have happened there. There's very little sign in Haiti, I'm told, of any kind of substantial improvement. Lots of money has disappeared. There's never been the kind of accounting that we really need here. And when I saw after, I think it was, Harvey first and then Irma, when I saw an ad on television that the 5 former presidents were getting together to, in theory, raise money for these hurricanes, all I could think is shame on all 5 of them. Shame on them. They should not be going out there now with a new organization that may or may not have been validly put together at a time like this, engaging in the pattern and practice of charity fraud, which Bill Clinton is a master at this point. I think he's the leader of the pack. I think the Bush family, are generous people who have not been careful enough in their dealings with the Clintons. I see signs, Barack Obama Foundation has major issues, and I think this is an area where former president of the United States, this great country, the most powerful, largest, most charitable country on earth, they should definitely not be involved in international charity fraud, and shame on them for not being careful enough in this work. I think the people of this country, the United States and other countries, need to stand up. We need to focus on this type of charity fraud wherever it may occur. Other former leaders in Canada and France and Australia and other countries are doing this. Shame on them too. Shame on the people who are here in New York City right now in the UN meeting if they have or think they're going to get presidential or whatever you want to call them foundations after they leave office, because that's not something they should be allowed to do, in my opinion.
Now, I want to say something. This is my commentary, not Charles. Charles, I believe you're a very courageous truth teller and a great researcher, but you're also a diplomat to the degree that, The Bushes, I think, are probably a little bit more knee-deep in some of this corruption than maybe you do. And I base that on George Bush Sr.'s involvement in the CIA as director and the drug running in Mena, Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was governor. So I've always made the leap that it's the Bushes that created the Clintons out of nowhere, essentially, and got them into the White House. But I don't want to get too far off track here. I do want to ask you about peak deep state corruption. Now, if we talk about the Clinton body count, I think we need to talk about the DNC lawsuit by Jared and Elizabeth Beck that was thrown out of court, and Jared and Elizabeth Beck were receiving all sorts of frightening calls, one of which tracked directly back to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's own congressional office, where voice-changing technology was being used to essentially threaten Jared and Elizabeth Beck. Anyway, the lawsuit has been thrown out, and it just seems that wherever the Clintons are concerned, people die. Like Branton Whitenaught down there in Florida, right in Debbie Wasserman Schultz's own district. And your friend, or at least somebody you spoke with prior to his death, Peter Smith, who was doing some investigation, I believe, of the Clintons or the DNC. You correct me where I'm wrong. And he died in Rochester, Minnesota, right across the street from the Mayo Clinic. And of course, it was ruled a suicide. But he was found asphyxiated with a bag over his head. And I think like a helium wired into the bag. Somehow he asphyxiated and killed himself, they say. But you don't believe that for a minute, do you?
Well, so let me just give you a general comment, then I'll react specifically to that question. My general comment would be this, that, in 2017, if since September 11th, 2001, the deep state had, dispatched Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the variant forms of terror, brought peace on earth in ways that we maybe didn't want to really know about, I might understand the idea that we should have 17 different security agencies that are unregulated in the United States that harness, probably listening to this phone call, who knows, we're probably watching each of us as we speak, and that these agencies should have black budgets, that is to say budgets that nobody really understands how big they are, that they might be allowed to engage in nefarious activities and keep the profits, to fund their activities and do all kinds of off-the-book stuff. If all of this were working, and even then, I would have grave questions, because if you're a student, as an amateur student of history as I am, one of the oldest questions in governance is who regulates the regulator, and the answer to that question is the people. If we, the people, are asleep and trusting, and say, "Oh yeah, we need these people to go off and do whatever they do," and not explain to us what's really going on, and the incidental harm that may be happening, how much money they may be stealing, and I don't sign on to that general program. I think that our brave men and women in the official military do fantastic work, align and support people. But as the military gets politicized, as these deep state portions get politicized, the temptation to engage in illegal activities inside this country and elsewhere is just too great. And we, the people, haven't done the job yet. We haven't held these people to account. Donald Trump doesn't seem to be making enormous progress yet in doing so. Indeed, it looks to me as if the deep state is winning so far against Donald Trump. And so, that would be my general comment. My specific comment about Peter Smith, I had many phone conversations with Peter Smith. Indeed, I may have been one of the last people to speak to him before his passing. I spoke to him, I think, within 24 hours of the time of death that has been out there, 24 hours before, that is. And in our conversation, I've mentioned this on television, on radio, Peter was upbeat. He may have been a fantastic actor. He may have had all kinds of problems I didn't know about, but we were talking about long-term projects he was going to do together with me, warning certain donors to the Clinton Foundation that they were in serious trouble potentially based on the status of the Clinton Foundation and the fact that those donors should have known better, but yet supported the Clinton Foundation for a long period of time. He was eager to pursue these projects within 24 hours of his passing. So when I originally was told of it, it was described as death, just normal death from whatever. And that made sense to me because Peter was in his 80s, early 80s, and he was out at the Mayo Clinic, supposedly. Unfortunately, we all must go. And so initially I signed on to the idea maybe he had a heart attack or a stroke or who knows. But then many weeks later, when the news was revealed that he, in theory, took his own life, my comment on that is, I have not seen convincing evidence of that. That doesn't mean there isn't convincing evidence. It's just so far I haven't seen convincing evidence that this actually was a suicide. And I have, I'm not a murder investigator. I do like spy novels, but that doesn't, that's like saying I stayed in the La Quinta Inn, so therefore I'm a forensic expert. But looking at this trail, I would have imagined that it's pretty tough to take your own life the way it's talked about here, and that, maybe somebody was with him at the time to hold him down as he fought in the last minutes. I just think that the details that are in the public domain so far to me do not hang together. Doesn't mean they might not in the end be proven true. I think this is an area where trained forensic investigators need to look at this with open eyes and, prepare, do their analysis, and prepare a convincing report to be shared as appropriate. Now, I don't know in this circumstance whether the public has a right to know or doesn't have a right to know, but, and I have enormous respect for the grief that the family and friends are going through. But, the story we have been told does not hang together yet for me.
Well, I have to tell you, it's just par for the course, as it pertains to anybody that seems to get too close to the Clintons and become an enemy who ends up dead. It seems to always be ruled a suicide. And again, I'll bring up Branton Weissnot, who was that federal prosecutor in Florida in Debbie Wasserman Schultz's own district, who was washed up on the beach. He was found on a beach near Miami, I believe, and it was very quickly reported that he had head injuries. Then it was leaked that it appeared to be gunshots to his head. It appeared to be a murder. It was being investigated as a murder. And then a couple months went by, and it was ruled a suicide, which the family does not believe. It just seems to be par for the course for these people. So in our final minutes together, let me just, and this is me talking, guys, this isn't Charles. I just want to see if Charles has a reaction to any of this information. Charles, if you've been following any of the research George Webb has been doing about Haiti, about the Clinton Foundation, about DynCorp, about child trafficking, organ harvesting, Laura Silsby being caught at the border trying to smuggle out 33 children out of Haiti after the earthquake and the Clintons coming to her aid. If you take any of that information in its totality, do you have any idea why Peter Smith was near the Mayo Clinic, or does the Mayo Clinic play into any of this as it pertains to potential organ harvesting? And the reason I bring that up is because I did hear an InfoWars interview with Elizabeth Beck, where exactly what I've just described was the case that was made. And Elizabeth Beck's eyes popped out of her head because she realized, I think, at that moment how deep she was into this risky area of meddling in the Clintons' business, and I think it scared the heck out of her. So do you have any information or input on any of the things I've just discussed there?
Well, I know George, he's a good man. I know another person, Jason Goodman. The two of them have done a lot of work in this area. I know the Becks as well. I think on the question of the Awan scandal, to start with that one, I think the Awan scandal, unlike the Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post, who says it's just mere intrigue, there's nothing there, I think the Awan scandal could be far bigger than Watergate. I think the idea that, a bunch of Pakistanis, might be put in positions of trust where they could get the confidential information of a lot of Congress people, it seems they're mostly Democrats, including one who is now the Attorney General of California, who brought with him his deputy then in Congress, is now the Deputy Attorney General of California. I think you're talking about, 45 different Democratic Congresspeople turn over their most sensitive information to a bunch of, sure looks to me like fraudsters and crooks, connected to one of the fraud countries of the world. I mean, the number one export, I think, of Pakistan, I'm saying this in joke, is fraud. And, who made the decision to let the Awans have the jobs they had? Who made that decision? Because that person needs to be denied a pension and put in prison. And, we need to really follow that to its logical conclusion. So what I would suggest happens is that in areas like this of fraud, the global community of fraudsters is interested in A, not getting caught, and B, perpetrating, in my view, the largest frauds possible. So they see this type of thing going on for a long time, and they flock to it. The notion that the Clintons are sitting there harvesting organs, I don't sign on to that one. The notion that they could be used as foils to be the public face of these things, while the real fraudsters do the most diabolical things they can around the world, that I buy into.
Sure.
Call me naive, but I'd really like to believe that a former president and an aspiring president of the United States would not sink to those depths. Now, when on the subject of coincidences, a lot of what we're talking about here is coincidental. And my own father, who is very much alive, as a nuclear physicist, often points out, think of all the coincidences you don't notice. So, just because there are, things tied, in the same story does not necessarily mean that one caused the other. So I tread very carefully on that. I do think within Haiti, it's a fundamentally corrupt place, sadly, a desperate place. Life is cheap down there. And, could people be trafficked out of Haiti? Of course they could. Could organs be harvested out of Haiti? Of course they could. But just as Americans are punished for sex crimes internationally, I think Americans and in other civilized nations that take the rule of law seriously, who engage in this type of activity, as I said in the beginning, should be subjected to penalties equivalent to those for murder, which in certain states are death. And, I think it is absolutely despicable to run a charity or a relief effort in Haiti the way the charities and relief efforts have been run. And I think we, the people, and our colleagues around the world who are in civilized nations, who care about law and order, we deserve an honest accounting. We deserve a real investigation. We deserve to know who was behind all this. And the people who are behind all of this need to get appropriate sentences for their crimes.
I couldn't agree more. And, but one of the disheartening things is that DNC lawsuit. Even when you get two honest, courageous people whose hearts are in the right place, like Elizabeth and Jared Beck, when they go and they file a lawsuit to hold the DNC accountable for its fraud, for its corruption, the judge dismisses the suit. It's so hard for good, honest people in this nation to get justice. And at the end of the day, that is what is most disheartening about this peak corruption. We don't know how to stop it because we don't even appear to be able to stop it when we do the right thing legally and work with the courts and work within the system. That is the most frustrating part. But I do agree with you about the Awans. My hope is that they actually, before they were granted immunity here, they were grilled and the information was gotten. Because, we've seen what happens when the FBI provides immunity to witnesses against the DNC prior to getting the goods and the information from them, then nobody wants to talk. So I sure hope that what you've just described as it pertains to the Iwans comes to pass, and I sure hope that heads roll. I mean, we know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz specifically is, she had to step down from the DNC because of her corruption. So it's high time we see big names do a perp walk, Charles. So final word to you, and tell people how they can find you and track your work, will you please?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Keep up the fight. I have a website, www.charlesortel.com. I'm doing a show, Sunday Charles, on Crowdsource the Truth, an excellent site. If you Google me and date restrict it to the recent period, you'll see there's lots of various radio interviews. On Twitter, I'm at Charles Ortel, uppercase C, uppercase O, spelled O-R-T-E-L. I try to tweet out a fair bit. I'm delighted, as I say, to be on your show. Thanks for having me back on. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you keep up the fight.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate it. And, many of us look to guys like you, guys who do it the right way, proper, vetted research. Let's hold the speculation where it belongs, and let's talk about the facts. That is real journalism. That is real investigative reporting and investigative journalism. And Charles Ortel, you're great at it. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. You know how much we appreciate it. Check us out at the new and improved mobile-friendly SGT Report. Please do support our sponsor, SD Bullion. Click at the banner at the top of SGT Report to get a great deal on physical silver and or gold. And check us out at thelibertymill.com for real news 24/7. Guys, thanks so much for listening. God bless. Bye-bye.
Let's examine more the root sickness of the spiritual battle. What's happening in our country, but really all over the world. And of course, Christians know that it's the battle of evermore. It's the battle of light versus dark, good versus evil.